بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. والمراد بالعدل من له ملكة تحمله على ملازمة التقوى والمروءة. والمراد بالتقوى اجتناب الأعمال السيئة من شرك أو فسق أو بدعة. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentioned that the first condition for a narration to be classified as sahih is that the narrator must be adil, he must be adil. And then he explained this condition by mentioning two qualities that the narrator must possess, and then he will be considered as adil. The first is that he must have taqwa, and the second is that he must have muru'wwah. So now he explains this first quality, which is taqwa, but he does not explain the second quality. He does not explain what is muru'wwah. So inshallah, we'll first go through the text. We'll see what he's explaining as taqwa, and thereafter we'll also speak a little bit about muru'wwah. So he says, وَالْمُرَادُ بِالتَّقْوَى اجْتِنَابُ الْأَعْمَالِ السَّيِّئَةِ. That the meaning of taqwa is that a person must stay away from all evil acts. And now he clearly mentions which evil acts a person must stay away from. So he says, min shirkin, from polytheism. So the first important sin that a person must stay away from is from associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person wants to narrate a hadith, then he has to stay away from shirk. Now, although Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentions about shirk, this also incorporates kufr. So therefore, even if a person is a Jew or a Christian, then too his narrations would not be accepted. And the reason why these people's narrations will never be accepted is because we can never trust them. That how can we be sure that this person is truthful and accurate in what he is narrating? Because he could have a hidden agenda, isn't it? That he wants to introduce new things in the Sharia by falsely attributing Ḥadīth or statements or actions to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allama Sarakhsi rahimahullah, he wrote in his Usul in volume 1 on page 346, فَأَمَّا اشْتِرَاطُ الْإِسْلَامِ لِانْتِفَاءِ تُهْمَةِ الْكَذِبِ. That the reason why we are stipulating that the narrator has to be a Muslim is لِانْتِفَاءِ تُهْمَةِ الْكَذِبِ, is because we have this apprehension that probably this person here is speaking a lie. He has ulterior motives. لا باعتبار نقصان حال المخبر بل باعتبار زيادة شيء فيه. It's not that we're just disregarding this narrator. We're not considering that this person here in his business dealings, he's so honest. This person, there's no proof that he ever spoke a lie. But it's because of another reason which has a greater impact. يدل على كذبه, and this action here would probably indicate to us that this person could be lying في خبره. وذلك لأن الكلام في الأخبار التي يثبت بها أحكام الشرع وهم يعادوننا في الأصل الدين. That what's a hadith all about? It's to establish the laws of Sharia, isn't it? وهم يعادوننا في أصل الدين بغير حق على وجه هو نهاية في العداوة فيحملهم ذلك على السعي في هدم أركان الدين بإدخال ما ليس منه فيه. وإليه أشار الله تعالى في قوله لا يألونكم خبالا، أي لا يقصرون في الإفساد عليكم. And besides that, the non-Muslims, they were not committed to attending the majalis of ahadith and to preserving ahadith like how the Muslims were. So the Muslims, they would make sure that they go to the majalis of hadith, they listen attentively, they write accurately, and then they copy and they cross-check with their colleagues to see if everything is written precisely, and then they memorize it, and they make sure that when they are transmitting it, they are transmitting it exactly as they heard it. So there's no proof that the non-Muslims would take this kind of precaution. So therefore, we can never accept the narrations of a non-Muslims. Now here you can see that the muhaddithin, they place the condition of Islam under Adalah. That by saying a person must be adil, they mean and they imply that this person must also be a Muslim. So Islam is a condition, but they don't mention the condition of Islam separately. Rather, they consider that Islam is covered by the condition of Adalah. You can see Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah is speaking about Adalah, but he is clearly mentioning that a person should not be a mushrik. So this means that the narrator must be a Muslim. So the muhaddithin, they stipulate that a person must be a Muslim, but they did not mention it separately. Rather, they intended with the condition of Adalah. But in contrast to that, many Hanafi Usuliyin, they clearly mentioned the condition of Islam separately, and they mentioned the condition of Adalah separately. So these Hanafi scholars, they do not assume that the essential condition of Islam is covered by Adalah. Rather, they felt that it's necessary, it's important that both of these conditions need to be mentioned separately. So this here goes back to the discussion that we concluded the last lesson with on whether Adalah is according to the literal usage or whether it is a technical term and it's used according to the istilahi meaning. So if it is according to the lughwi meaning, then a non-Muslim can be honest, a non-Muslim can be upright, isn't it? So therefore, if you are considering adil to be the lughwi meaning, then you will have to mention it separately. However, here you can see that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah is mentioning it as a istilahi meaning. So now when you are mentioning it as a technical meaning, then you can stipulate that he must be a Muslim under the condition of Adalah. So the difference is that Hanafis are using the word Adalah in the literal usage, and the muhaddithin, when they do not stipulate the condition of Islam separately, then this is because of the istilahi meaning. And then the Hanafis, they also divide Adalah to Adalah Zahira and Adalah Batina. So Adalah Zahira is, we look at the fact that a person is a Muslim and therefore he ought to be Adil, and Adalah Batina is that we need to now inspect and confirm how truthful the person is, even though he might be a Muslim. But there's a long explanation and discussion with regards to that. We will not go into all of that. You can just know that Hanafis, this is how they explain Adalah Zahira and Adalah Batina. So nonetheless, all that refers to Shirkul Akbar. It could also refer to Shirkul Asghar. Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he explains the sentence by saying, Min shirkin ay jaliyin aw khafiyyin. So that was the first essential condition that the first essential sin that a narrator must abstain from. Then the next evil act that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentions is aw fisqin, or transgression. So Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he explains in his commentary on page 248, aw fisqin ay bitarki wajibin aw bifa'ali haramin. So that means that the narrator should not be sinful because of failing in fulfilling his obligations. So that's the one way he could be a fasiq, or the second way that he can be a fasiq is because he is sinful because of perpetrating forbidden actions. Now here, an important point to also keep in mind is that this does not mean that the narrator must be sinless and he must be perfect, because he's a human being after all, and we mentioned about this here previously. So being a human being, he can slip up occasionally. And والذي صح عن الشافعي أنه قال ليس من الناس من يمحض الطاعة فلا يمزجها بمعصية. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah is mentioning this, that there is no person who he like only and only he was so punctual on only obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he did not mix it up with disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا فِي الْمُسْلِمِينَ مَن يُمَحِّضَ الْمَعْصِيَةَ فَلَا يُمَزِّجُهَا بِالطَّاعَةِ. And then you don't get people who are only sinful and not even once in their life. At least they'll even come for the Jum'ah Salah. So فَلَا سَبِيلَ إِلَى رَدِّ الْكُلِّ وَلَا إِلَى قَبُولِ الْكُلِّ فإن كان الأغلب على الرجل من أمره الطاعة والمروءة قبلت شهادته وإن كان الأغلب المعصية وخلاف المروءة رددتها. So he's mentioning that you rather base it according to his overwhelming condition. That majority of the time, if he's obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he's carrying himself for dignity, like I said, we'll speak about Muruwwah, then he's saying that he will accept him. And if majority of the time he is disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is doing a lowly acts, then he's saying that he will reject him. So the important condition is that the narrator must stay away from major sins. And then if he has to slip up because he's a human being, then he must make tawbah. So Allama Bazdawi rahmallah, he said, فَأَمَّا مَنِ ابْتُلِيَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ غَيْرِ الْكَبَائِرِ مِنْ غَيْرِ إِصْرَارٍ فَعَدْلٌ كَامِلُ الْعَدَالَةِ وَخَبْرُهُ حُجَّةٌ فِي إِقَامَةِ الشَّرِيعَةِ. This is in his usul on page 166. But it's also important that the narrator must stay away from minor sins as much as possible. So Allama Abu Bakr al-Sayrafi rahimahullah, he mentioned, and this is quoted in Al-Bahr al-Muhit in volume 3, page 333. So it's very easy to remember this reference. 3333. So he mentions, من قارف كبيرة ردت شهادته ومن اقترف صغيرة لم ترد شهادته ولا روايته. If a person perpetrates a minor act, then لم ترد شهادته ولا روايته. But thereafter he said, والمواظبة على الصغيرة كمقارفة الكبيرة. That persisting and continuously perpetrating a minor sin, that is equal and tantamount to doing a major sin. So those are two conditions, staying away from shirk and staying away from fisq. The third bad thing that a person should stay away from is bid'ah. He should stay away from innovation. So with regards to this here, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah is going to discuss it in more detail later on page 102. So there you will see that he's actually more lenient on bid'ah. He would accept if certain principles and conditions are fulfilled, then he will accept the narration of a innovator. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah and Imam Muslim rahimahullah, they accepted the narrations of some innovators and cited the narrations in their respective sahihs. You know that the last narration of Sahih al-Bukhari, by who it's narrated? It's narrated by a innovator. So this clause is governed by laws and principles, and Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah is going to discuss it all on page 102, and then inshallah we will also elaborate more on it and we'll discuss all those conditions and the various views etc. under that chapter. But here you should note that by just mentioning bid'ah like this here without putting any stipulations and conditions, this actually conforms with the view of many Hanafi scholars. Because there are many Hanafi scholars, they said that it's not permissible to accept the narration of an innovator in all circumstances. You can't say that it's governed by conditions, there's some principles, and then you can accept it. Rather, the minute a person is not from the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the minute a person is an innovator, is introducing things into deen which is not part of deen, then they would say that you cannot accept his narrations. But like I said, let us leave this discussion for that chapter, inshallah. So in short, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, if you look at this definition of taqwa, he's saying that a Muslim who stays away from sins and innovations, that is a muttaqi person. He has the quality of taqwa. So this is the definition of taqwa that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah has presented. Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he explained that there are various stages of taqwa. So he writes in his commentary on page 247, وَهُوَ عَلَى مَرَاتِبٍ أَدَنَاهَا التَّقْوَى عَنِ الشِّرْكِ. That it's of different levels. The bare minimum is that a person has to stay away from ascribing partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the first level. Then وَمِنْهَا إِرْتِكَابُ الْأَوَامِرِ وَاجْتِنَابُ الزَّوَاجِرِ. That the second condition, so this here is a higher level, is that a person obeys all the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's fasting, whether it's salah, whether it's zakah, whether it's hajj. He obeys all the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he stays away from all the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then a stage which is higher than that, ومنها ترك الشبه والمكروهات, that those things which are not really proven to be haram, but there's doubt in whether it is haram, or those things which are abominable, those things which are makruh, a person stays away from those actions. So that's a higher level. You know that famous narration, al-halalu bayyin wal-haramu bayyin wa baynahuma, and then it comes with different wordings, wa baynahuma shubuhat, mushabbihat, that there are those things which put you into doubt, or there are those things which are doubtful. فَمَنِ اتَّقَى الشُّبُهَاتِ فَقَدْ اسْتَبْرَأَ لِدِينِهِ وَعِرْضِهِ. So a person stays away from that which is doubtful, and he also stays away from that which is makruh. So that's the third level. Then the fourth level, which is even higher, وَمِنْهَا تَرْكُ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ الْمُبَاحَاتِ, that a person stays away from permissible things which his soul and his desires crave for. So it's permissible to eat food, but the person, he wants to crush his nafs, and therefore he would stay away from that. It's permissible to do a particular action, but just because he wants to go against his nafs, he does not do it. And then the highest level of taqwa is وَمِنْهَا تَرْكُ الْغَفْلَةِ فِي جَمِيعِ الْحَالَاتِ, is that a person is not negligent at any time of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know that this here is ihsan, that all the time you know that you are seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing you. And then Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah, he sums up all of this here by saying وَمُجْمَلُهَا الْإِحْتِرَازِ عَمَّا يُذَمُّ شَرْعًا, that the summary of taqwa is that you must just stay away from everything that is even criticized according to Sharia. So it's not necessarily haram if it's even just criticized. So all this is the explanation of the of half of the first condition of Sahih, because the first condition of Sahih has 2 points. So the first half of it is that a person must have taqwa, and then what's the second half? That the second condition is that a person must have muruwwah. So now inshallah we'll explain what is muruwwah. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he did not explain muruwwah. Alam al-Qani rahimahullah, he mentions the reason in Qada al-Watr on page 671. وَسَكَتَ عَنِ الْمُرُوءَةِ لِشُيُوعِ عِلْمِهَا, because everybody knows what's muruwwah, so therefore he did not feel it necessary to explain what's muruwwah, dignity. But nevertheless, Alam al-Qani rahimahullah, he explained it and he said, إِذْ هِيَ التخلق بخلق أمثاله في زمانه ومكانه, that it is adopting the social etiquette that are common in your era and in your area. So you understand, zamanihi in your era and wamakanihi in your area. So the social etiquette that is common in your place during your time, you adopt that. Now here it's important to note that this here refers to whose ethics. That you don't here look at the ethics of those people who really have no ethics. Rather, it refers to those who have the status of being followed and being emulated. It refers to the morals of those who are muqtada. It refers to the standards of those who are on the caliber of setting standards. So it does not just refer to the customs and the habits of the laymen. Alama Ibn al-Hanbali rahimahullah in al-Faru' al-Athith on page 79, he explains muruwwah as as-siyana 'an al-adnas wa-at-tarafu' 'amma yushina 'inda an-nas, that you stay away from things which people in your vicinity during your time would regard as awful, as despicable, and all acts of those who lack morals and etiquette. Now this here differs from area to area. Like, to give you examples, in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they have the habit of spitting pan, isn't it? So they regard it as absolutely normal. So even the most noble of people there, they would do it in public because it's just so natural. However, in our countries, this here is regarded as an abhorrent act. That if someone is to come here and publicly spit out pan, people will look at him and they will find it disgusting. They will take offense to it. Likewise, in China, they take off their shoes when they go to the toilet. So when visiting the bathroom, that's the time they remove their shoes. And if we don't have our shoes on and we need to visit the bathroom, then we will put on our shoes and then we will go to the toilet. And then another example is that in the Khalij, in Saudi, Kuwait, Qatar, etc., they eat with their palms. So they take the food in their palms, and from the palms they insert the food into their mouth. So this here contradicts the Sunnah, because we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he ate with his Mubarak fingers. And then after they put the food in their mouth, then they dust their hands in the plate before taking another morsel. So people from our countries, they find this here to be disgusting. And in the same way, there can be things which we do here, and people in the other countries, they would regard it as a bad. So it all depends, and it differs from place to place. It depends on the area, and it differs from place to place. So Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he sums it up in a very beautiful way. Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he would like his rhymes. So he writes, وهو كمال الإنسان من صدق اللسان واحتمال عثرات الإخوان وبذل الإحسان إلى أهل الزمان وكف الأذى عن الجيران. So this here is basically just mentioning all the good qualities and that you should adopt in saving yourself from the bad qualities. And then he also says, وقيل المروءة التخلق بأخلاق أمثاله وأقرانه وولدانه بلبسه ومشيه وحركاته وسكناته وسائر صفاته. That you dress in a dignified way, you walk with dignity, the way you present yourself. So you see, if you go to a particular city, and if you do something that contradicts their ethics, you do something which contradicts what they are accustomed to, then they will regard you as the odd one out. That even if it might be a noble practice, because they are not accustomed to seeing people doing that, they're not used to that action, so therefore they're going to find it strange, and then they will look down upon you. So therefore they're saying that you should do actions which the people of the vicinity, but remember again that it refers to the actions of the noble people of that vicinity, that what they are accustomed to, you present yourself for that. That is what's considered as Muruwwah. Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah then also mentions that in some areas they might regard certain professions to be from the low class. Like you say, وَفِي الْمَفَاتِيحِ خوارم المروءة كالدباغة والحجامة. Now look here, hijama, cupping. So now if you take into consideration era and area, in our areas and communities during our time, people would regard hijama as a sunnah. So generally it's the ulama and alimas who do cupping on the sunnah days. So therefore it's now no more regarded as the profession of a low person. Yes, probably here in South Africa you could say that having the job of a car guard or maybe of a barber, these are regarded as low professions. والحياكة مما لا يليق به من غير ضرورة وكالبول في الطريق. If a person is to do despicable actions like these, like he urinates publicly, وصحبة الأراذل, can you see, even just hanging out with low people, being in a company of gangsters, etc. واللعب الحمام وأمثال ذلك ومجملها الاحتراز عما يذم عرفا. A text from Fath al-Mughith comes to mind. Al-Masakhawi rahmallah mentions it in volume 1 on page 291. So although it's not a direct explanation, it will serve as a brilliant illustration for what Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah mentioned. So just hear the Arabic and inshallah you'll understand it. وما أحسن قول الزنجابي في شرح الوجيز المروءة يرجع في معرفتها إلى العرف. And thereafter he says تتعلق بمجرد الشارع وأنت تعلم أن الأمور العرفية قل ما تضبط بل هي تختلف باختلاف الأشخاص والبلدان فكم من بلد جرت عادة أهله بمباشرة أمور لو باشرها غيرهم لعد خرما للمروءة. وفي الجملة رعاية مناهج الشرع وآدابه والاهتداء بالسلف والاقتداء بهم أمر واجب الرعاية. So this is what he mentions. So it basically goes back to staying away from any action that people will criticize or look down upon. Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, he mentioned, الكامل المروءة من أحرز دينه ووصل رحمه واجتنب ما يلام شرعا واجتنب ما يلام عليه, that a person will be said to have perfect dignity if he firstly protects his deen, thereafter he keeps ties and he stays away from everything that is looked down upon. So we can sum up Muruwwah and explain it like this here: to be a dignified person with a high level of morals and integrity and ethics, and to carry yourself with nobility and graciousness. An interesting thing to tell you, Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah, he describes Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah as having perfect Muruwwah. So Alama Saymari rahimahullah, in his book Akhbar Abi Hanifa on page 41, he quotes with his sanad to Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah that he said, ما صحبت أحدا من الناس فيقدر أن يقول إنه رأى أكمل عقلا ولا أتم مروءة من أبي حنيفة. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was on a different level. So since we are going also into this field, we need to see how we can also inculcate these noble qualities and how we can also become people of Muruwwah. Together with trying to have as much piety as possible, we also need to learn how to carry ourselves with decorum and with dignity. You know, in the beginning of the final year, our Shaykh al-Ḥadīth, Fazlur Rahman, he always quotes the poetry of Abu Bakr ibn Durayd rahimahullah. So Alama ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, he quotes the poetry. Then the last stanza of that poem is Ya talibi ilmin nabiyyi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wasallam ma antumu wa siwakumu bisawa'i. That, oh, the seekers of the knowledge of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, you and other people are not the same. What might be regarded as fine for other people, for you, because you need to carry yourself with this dignity, therefore it's not going to be fine for you. So whether it's going into shopping center and just roaming around or constantly eating out, this year people of dignity, they don't just chill around, etc. So you need to carry yourself like this here with dignity. And Muruwwah is something that can be learned. So we need to focus on the lives of those who are dignified, and we learn from their morals and ethics. We look at our akabir, we look at our seniors, and we learn from them. So Ahnafi would say, طالما خرقنا النعال إلى زيد بن حيلة فنتعلم منه المروءة يعني في الجاهلية. This is in الإصابة في تمييز الصحابة. So you can see you can learn Muruwwah. So nevertheless, these are two components of adala, that a person should have taqwa and a person should have muru'ah. Now once we explained all of that, we can quote the summary of adala as mentioned by Imam Hakim rahimahullah. So in his Ma'arifah Ulum al-Ḥadīth on page 99, he wrote, وأصل عدالة المحدث أن يكون مسلما لا يدعو إلى بدعة ولا يعلم من أنواع المعاصي ما تسقط به عدالته. Must a narrator have all of these good qualities from the time of tahammul until the time of ada. So you know, tahammul means the time when you hear the narration until the time you make ada of the narration, until the time when you narrate the hadith. So must a person be adil of this caliber? Must he have this taqwa in muru'ah at the time when he heard the hadith? So for example, a person hears a narration at the age of 20, but he only narrates that when he is 50. So does he have to have these sublime qualities only at the age of 50 when he is narrating? Or does he have to have these sublime qualities from the time of hearing right up until the time of narrating? So Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he wrote, he says, ثم هل يجب حصول الملكة حالة الأداء فقط أو حالة التحمل إلى حالة الأداء. And then Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he gives the answer and he says, وَالْأَظْهَرْ الْأَوَّلِ. That it's what's more apparent, that you only need to have these qualities when you are transmitting the narration, not at the time when you heard the narration. So based on this here, many latter-day Hanafi scholars, they ruled that if a person is a fasiq, or even if a person is a kafir at the time of hearing the narration, but later on he repented or he accepted Islam, then his narration will be accepted. So Ibn al-Humam rahimahullah, he cites a narration of the Muwatta of Imam Malik rahimahullah to support this view, and we'll just quote it directly from the Muwatta. Imam Malik rahimahullah, he narrates from Ibn Shihab, who narrates from Muhammad ibn Jubair ibn Mut'im, who narrates from his father Jubair ibn Mut'im, that he says that I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam qara'a bit-tur fil maghrib, that I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reciting with tur in Salatul Maghrib. So Jubair ibn Mut'im, he heard this when he came as a prisoner from the battle of Badr, and then he only narrated it after becoming a Muslim. So in which condition did he hear it? When he was a non-Muslim, and when he transmitted it, he was a Muslim. Yet no one hesitated in accepting this narration from him. Amir Bacha, he explained, مع أن سماعه إياها منه صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما كان قبل أن يسلم لما جاء في فداء أسارى بدر. That this year was when he came as a prisoner with the prisoners of Badr. And then he also explained the next reason, وَلِعَدَمِ الْإِسْتِفْسَارِ. So this here then he explains what it means. عن مروي الصحابة وغيره هل تحمله في حالة الكفر أو الإسلام. No one would ever ask that, when did you hear this narration? Because obviously if a person is narrating it to you, you don't know when he heard it, at what condition he was at that time. Yet no one bothered to clarify, are you sure you heard this when you were a Muslim? You accepted Islam in this year, you sure you didn't hear this narration before that. ولو كان التحمل في حالة الإسلام شرط قبول الرواية لاستفسر ولو استفسر لنقل. That had this been an integral and important condition, then they would have asked, and if they had to ask, then it would have been transmitted. So if this is regarding a kafir at the time of hearing, then all the more reason. If a person was a Muslim but he was a sinner at the time when he heard the narration, and then he repented and became pious at the time when he's transmitting, then all the more reason that the narration of that person will be accepted. So just as a person can be thiqa and then he can become weak, isn't it? That later on in life he can start to lose his memory, etc. So in the same way, a person can also be initially weak and thereafter he can become thiqa. So now we can conclude this here by mentioning the summary of why Adalah has been stipulated as an integral and important condition for Sahih narrations. So Alama Bazdawi rahimahullah, he explained this here in his Usul on page 163. He says, فَأَمَّا الْعَدَالَةِ فإنما شرطت لأن كلامنا في خبر مخبر غير معصوم عن الكذب فلا يثبت صدقه ضرورة بل الاستدلال والاحتمال وذلك بالعدالة وهو الانزجار عن محظورات دينه ليثبت به رجحان الصدق في خبره. Because the narrators were not infallible, so therefore we need to stipulate these kind of conditions so that we can determine whether we can accept what they are transmitting to us or whether we will have to reject the report. So that will conclude this lesson, inshallah. In the next lesson we'll explain the second condition for a narration to be sahih. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.